I'm back getting ready to do a full inspection on this M113 V8 engine. I have to say I was really impressed with the comments I got on the first video. Apparently there's quite a few of you who know these engines in and out, and you probably don't even need this video. I really intended this video series to be an introduction to those interested in getting one of these cars, or maybe having just got one wanting to learn how to work on them themselves. You know, I think this is one of the best engines you can have to teach somebody how to work on a gasoline engine. If you have a daughter or son you want to do some educational training, this is a good one right here. This is a good one to teach some basic automotive engine maintenance. And so for a lot of those comments, in some ways I feel like I was preaching to the choir, and I'm going to do this inspection, and you're going to say, well, Kent, you're inspecting a lot more than 9 items. And that's true. I might end up inspecting 20 items. But when I'm all done, I'm going to come up with the top 9 that I need to do right away. Because a lot of times you don't need to do everything all at once. There's 2 of them that I'll show you later in this video that I'm going to do before I even start this engine up again, because those items have caused great grief to a lot of owners, and in some cases left them stranded. And by the way, I'm going to turn the comments off. The reason is I want people to watch the video, not read the comments. And I've also had problems with people trying to hijack some of these videos to ask other technical questions, not even related to the subject, but just watch the video. If you're not interested in learning how to maintain one of these engines, don't watch the video. Since I just removed the cover on the engine, I'm going to inspect the air filters. I can't believe how many times the air filters in these M112 and M113 engines get neglected. I've seen them with dirt, junk, bird feathers, whatever. You can look down in here in the hole, and it gives you a pretty good idea if the filter is just totally filthy. And when I inspect the filters, I'm also going to inspect the sealing ring. This is very important. When these harden up with age, they won't seal against the intake, and you'll be sucking dirt and crud down into your engine. If I've got a car with over 120,000 miles, I just order one of these when I order new filters. And we'll pull these screws off. Okay, and then you flip it over, there's your filter. Well, look at that. This is one of the cleanest ones I've seen. But you can take and pull it out. Don't just look at the top. This is what you want to look at right there. You can see how clean it is inside. So this filter passes the inspection. I'm not going to order new filters. The next thing to inspect is the valve covers and the breather covers for oil leaks. This is one of the more common issues you'll find on these engines. And you'll see right away if this breather cover is leaking. You can see the oil right there. The oil will puddle right in there. If this gets gunked up inside, a lot of sludge and carbon, and this hose gets plugged, you're going to lose the breathing of the engine, and that could lead to excessive oil consumption and other problems. So if you have any kind of leak around here, you want to pull these off anyway, inspect them, clean them. Originally, 10 years ago, when I first came up with this breather fix repair kit, just doing the breather was usually enough. I didn't see a lot of leaks in the valve covers. But now, with these cars all 20 or more years old, I'm seeing more issues with valve cover leaks. You can reach down in here and wipe along the edge of the valve cover, and you're going to see that. And it's usually in the corners. Down in this corner, you're going to see wetness. So what I recommend now is, if you're going to deal with your breather covers, do the valve cover gaskets as well. Do it all in one shot. That's why now I have a new kit which includes the valve cover gaskets and the instructions that go with it. As part of my valve cover leak inspection, I also take a close look at this oil filler cap. Look at the wetness here on the valve cover. This is real common. Obviously, people spill oil when they're putting oil into the engine. That can be a problem. But a lot of times the seal is bad on these caps. Now, you can replace the seal, but you can also just replace the cap because they're not expensive. I already did a video on this. We came up with a new tool that we call the wrist saver, because everybody was laughing. You're right, I have to go get my pliers or my vice grips. This is a special version just for the M112 and M113 engine. It's a little bit deeper, so it could get a hold of the cap and then just turn it off. So I'm going to provide on my website a new cap and 3 new seals. This should prevent having to live with this frustration. And this is a very important inspection item as well. Notice there's wetness around here. You can see the seal is totally crushed on the cap. I wouldn't bother trying to find a new seal, because what we want to do is replace this power steering fluid. When you do a flush, and this is one of those things that really gets neglected on this engine. I've seen videos where people just suck the fluid out and put some new fluid in. That's not going to do much, because you're not getting all the fluid out of your power steering system. So I have a kit now which takes you through a full flush process, and I even include some items to make the flushing process. The filter for this system is in the tank, so you have to replace the tank when you do a fluid change. The next item on my list is spark plugs. I think people don't change those because it's so expensive. There are 16 of them in the V8, and they're not particularly easy to get to if you don't have the right tools. So I've created some tools. This is the boot removal tool we make here in the shop. And then I have a special socket extension with a piece of rubber on it so you can actually work the spark plugs by hand. But we're going to just pull one spark plug out and inspect it. That'll kind of give us an idea how bad or how good these plugs are. It's almost impossible to reach in here and pull these spark plug wires off the spark plug. They just not even possible. They have to be pried off, and that's the purpose of this unique tool. Come right in here, lock on here, and then I can pry against the valve cover. Now, if you look how much force I'm having to use here, you'll see why you'd never get those off without this tool. I'm going to shoot some PB blaster down in there. Hopefully that can soak up the threads to prevent galling. I've let that soak for about 10 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and add this extra extension. That's going to give me a little bit more room to work with. Now it's turning. If you hear it squeak a little bit, that's a good sign. I think that PB blaster, and if you don't have PB blaster, any type of spray lubricant, just to spray down in there after you have loosened the threads up enough so the lubricant can actually leak down in here. Right now, I'm going to stop. Before you pull the plug out, you want to take compressed air and blow that area out where the plug is. So when I pull the plug out, I'm not dropping dirt down into the engine. This is where I like that little rubber grip there I put on the extension, because now I can spin it out by hand. This is always kind of like opening up a Christmas present. You never know what you're going to get. Okay, let's take a close look. You see how that lubricant really helped, but look at the gap. Look at the wear on that tip. So these plugs need to be changed, and I'm going to add that to my list. I thought you'd like to see this. Look at the new plug as opposed to this old plug. You can see the tip wear, but look at the gap, excessive gap. And the burn isn't too bad, the carbon isn't that bad, but these plugs are definitely worn out. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, well, Kent, what about the coils and the wires? Sometimes they last a long time, sometimes they don't, but there is a way to test these. I'm not just going to go out and buy new coil packs and all new wires until I pull them and test them. And I'm going to cover that in a later video, but I will have to remove all these coil packs in order to take the valve cover off. And at that time, I'll do the testing. If these prove to be weak, I'm going to replace them. It's always important you take a close look on any rubber hoses or rubber vacuum lines on these older engines like this M113 here. It's exactly 20 years old. So that's about the time when rubber and plastics start to deteriorate rapidly. And I'm going to be looking at breather hoses here. This one's nice and soft. Sometimes you'll find these as hard as a rock. You won't even be able to bend them. And I'm going to come along the front here by the secondary air injection pump, and I'm going to check all these vacuum hoses. Check for cracks. They should all be soft and they should be pliable. You may have to pull the pump off to see everything down in there. But so far, you know, when I pull on these, you want to make sure they're on tight. That's a little loose. this hose coming out of the breather cover is hard. And I can guarantee you when I go to pull this valve cover off, this is going to break. You're not going to be able to use it. So anytime you're pulling valve covers or doing any work on these breather covers, you might want to order a set of these breather hoses if you find they're hard and stiff like this one here. Obviously, this engine is going to get an oil change. I don't even need to inspect the oil. I'm just going to change the oil. I have no idea what oil or what filters have been used in the past, and it's very important with these engines that you use the correct quality fleece oil filters. This next item is just a very small item that I add to my inspection. But this little nipple coming out of this tank is prone to break. This hose gets very stiff, and that's plastic. And I'm just going to warn you, be very careful working around this engine. You bump this a few times, you're going to break that off. What I like to do is, sometimes I'll take and drill a hole here, and I'll come in here and put a clamp right there. Clamp that up tight, and that's going to reduce some of the potential for knocking that and breaking that fitting off right there. For any M112 or M113 engine, these two items I'm showing you here are a must. Unfortunately, there's not a good way to inspect these. This is the crank position sensor, which sits at the rear of the engine back there, and there's really no good way to inspect this or to test it. These can fail and leave you stranded, as many have reported. The voltage regulator on the back of the alternator, the brushes wear down, and you'll suddenly find your engine is not producing any charge to the battery, and that can be a real problem. So these two items right here, these are going to get changed before I even drive this car out of the shop. And I do have kits on my website with full instructions on how to do each of these yourself. And I always do a quick coolant inspection. It's basically looking at the color, and you want to make sure there's no evidence of oil. And the coolant looks fine, it's not dirty, and there's no oil spots floating on top of the coolant. So that doesn't mean I'm not going to change the coolant, but it's something that I'm not going to be too concerned about immediately. And now for the one I consider the big one. This is the front engine accessory inspection. I've always said this should probably be the 100K repair on these engines. And that has to do with all the accessories on the front of the engine, including all the pulleys and the belt. First thing I do is I'm just going to check the condition of the tensioner. I reach in, I lift up on the belt, lift up on it, and you should be able to pull it up, and it should snap right back down, and the belt should be tight. If you pull up on it and let go and the belt's kind of loose and sloppy, right away you know your belt tensioner is going to have to be changed. Now, to inspect all the pulleys, spinning the alternator, checking the water pump, the only way you can do this is you have to remove the belt. Watch how easy it is for me to get the tensioner loose like that. I'm going to lift up on the belt and I'm going to pull it off like that. Isn't that slick? All right, now let's take a look at these pulleys. The first thing you want to do is check the idler pulley, because that's almost always bad. Spin it and see if it makes any noise. Okay, that doesn't sound bad at all. Let's come down here to the alternator. I'm going to spin the alternator. Check for bearing play. That feels real good. Then I can spin the water pump. Also check, ooh, I don't like that. That water pump is just about ready to fail. So that's a good illustration why you want to do this. We're going to have to put the water pump on my list of repairs to make. Then I want to come over here and check the pulley for the tensioner right here. I'm going to spin that. Okay, I'm getting a little noise out of that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change this one anyway because they're very inexpensive, and I'm going to go ahead and change the pulley. Also, look at the roughness on the pulley surface. Remember, the belt runs on the back side on these. I don't think I need to change the tensioner, but I'm going to change the pulley. Then I'm going to come back over here and spin the power steering pump, check for play. That feels good. And then I can reach down here to the air conditioner and check that. So that's my inspection. There's one more thing I want to do, and I will do that with mirror, is check this front pulley on the engine to make sure it's not showing any cracks. This belt should be changed, even though it kind of looks okay. Remember, you want to also inspect the back side of the belt. See how smoothed out that is? You have two surfaces where the belt is driving on a flat surface, and that's the water pump, and that is the pulley down here for the tensioner. So if this is all worn out, it's possible that that might slip. So we're going to add the belt to my list of things to replace. That completes my front engine accessory inspection. I'll get a closer look at this when I get the water pump off and can look around and see if there's anything else I might need to attend to. And part of this inspection is looking at the radiator hoses. You know, they don't look that bad, but I'm going to change them. One of the problems you run into is corrosion under the hoses where they go over these aluminum nipples. And I'm going to go ahead and just change the thermostat. I think I've hit most of the highlights here. There's probably something else I can inspect. There may be other things that'll pop up when I get the valve covers off and I do some of this other maintenance. You know, I'm going to be pulling that belt and replacing a bunch of parts on the front of the engine. But in closing, I want to share with you a couple of bonus inspection tips. The first is on this thing right here. This is the secondary air injection pump. It's like a big blower. And I'm going to test this. I'm going to unplug it and I'm going to apply 12-volt power and make sure this is running. If it's not, it needs to be replaced. If it runs, that doesn't necessarily mean the whole system is okay, but it's quite easy just to test the operation of the pump. And then finally, I like to check my motor mounts. Now, this car has 145,000 miles and no history of having motor mounts changed, you know, and generally at that mileage you need to change them. But this is my not so scientific method of checking the motor mounts on these M113 and M112 engines. You have to do it with the covers off. I just get a hold of both sides here, and I'm going to see if I can rock it. Now, when I start rocking it, the engine should move maybe an inch or so, side to side. If the whole car moves, I can guarantee you that you're going to need new motor mounts. Okay, let's see that. Look at that. It doesn't, oh, I got maybe just a quarter of an inch. But this engine right here is sitting in this engine bay without any shock mounting at all. I know what you're thinking. Well, Kent, you just finished the inspection, but you haven't told us what those 9 other items are. Number 1 is the inspection, and that's what's so important. Take your time. There are a lot of things I need to deal with on this engine. And what I've learned over the years is you just can't come up with a list for everyone. You can't say, these are the 10 things you need to do. What if your car only has 70,000 miles on it? What if it has 100? What if it has 145 like this one? What if it has 200? Your list might be totally different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the 9 items in the description below this video. Just quickly, I'll list the 9 ones I'm going to focus on over the next week.